Hi there, this is David Weiss, your board game concierge here at 401 Games, and this week's Smorgasboard game is Forgotten Waters, a semi-cooperative, pirate-themed, choose-your-own-adventure style game from Plaid Hat Games. The latest in their Crossroads series, which started with the excellent Dead of Winter game. Now, I didn't play the second game in the series, Gen 7, which was this science fiction themed game played out in a spaceship, mainly because it was over $100. Now, I didn't know what to expect from Forgotten Waters. I couldn't quite imagine how the mechanics of Dead of Winter would play out in a high seas adventure. And although I don't think of myself as a pirate games fan, when I thought about it, I've actually played quite a few piratey themed games out there, none of which has actually scratch the itch of duplicating the experience of classic video games like Sid Meier's Pirates or even Monkey Island. I really haven't played a pirate themed game yet that gave me that yarrrr feeling. So let's look in the box and see if Forgotten Waters is that game and if it's the game for you. So I have to start this by saying that the heart of Forgotten Waters is the free web-based app which you have to download in order to play the game. It's definitely mobile friendly, as well as being totally functional offline once you download it. So if you and your group don't like integrating screens into your tabletop gaming, you might as well jump ship right now. I will say that in this case, I see the benefits of having an app for three main reasons. One, it makes it much harder to cheat by looking at the options you didn't pick. Two, it's easier than flipping back and forth in a scenario book like you have to do in, say, This War of Mine, or hunting for cards the way you do in Fallout the board game. And three, it leaves the door open for multiple expansions down the line. So, in Forgotten Waters, 3 to 7 players take the roles of members of a pirate ship's crew. Now, there are rules for 1 and 2 players, and having played at Solitaire, I can tell you it's totally playable Solitaire, but you do lose a bit of that piratey horror stab you in the back feeling, and it becomes much more of a traditional kind of choose your own adventure game. Now, there are 5 scenarios to choose from, to start with anyway, and each of which requires you as a group or as a person to work together to survive and meet the objectives. But you are also, if you're playing with more than one, competing to see who is the best pirate, which means there usually is going to be some stabbing in the back before the voyage is through. Yarrrr. Depending on the number of players, you will have 1 or more roles on the ship, which you see here. So you will split up these roles among the players. So there is the gunner, who's in charge of the cannons. You have the lookout, who's in charge of the threat track. You have the Koopa, who is in charge of supplies. You definitely don't want those to run out because you use supplies for almost everything. You have the first mate, who is in charge of keeping track of not only the size of the crew, but their discontent. And if these 2 tokens ever meet, if discontent rises to meet the crew, the game is over and everyone loses. You have the boatswain, who's in charge of the condition of the ship itself, the hull track. If this ever reaches 0, then everybody loses. And then you have the quartermaster, who is in charge of the infamy track, which is basically turn order. So players' tokens are put here in order of infamy and get to choose their actions in that order. And often it take various actions in that order. So, also, one of the players is the ship's scribe, who gets to be in charge of this cool piece of paper, which is the ship's log, It also keeps track of various in-game events, things to write down, which are keywords, which determine sometimes which paragraph to look at, and also the actual log of the player names if you're going to play over multiple sessions, as well as the save game state. So you can do that there, which is very convenient if you're playing over multiple sessions. Each pirate in particular gets their own unique booklet with their constellation, which I'll talk about in a second, their possible stats on the inside, various kind of choose your own, almost a Mad Lib-like thing here, where you're asked for various words and then you fill them in. These are your end game constellation effect, which I'll talk about later, endings and prompts. Even if you're hard pressed to pick a name, the last page of the rule book gives you a quite funny pirate name generator, yarrrr. So, and the rule book is not very long. So basically you've got the 2-page spread for components, the 1 page of setup. Setup is actually often handled by the app itself, telling you where exactly to place stuff. Then you have 3 pages of instructions, 1, 2, 3, and that's it. So, at any given time, you as the crew are represented in 2 places. One, by your ship's token on the map board here, which is set up at the beginning of the game and can change during the game, and your position as a ship changes over the course of the game, as well as your individual standees. And you will place those in what they call the location book. So at any given time, you will be in a location here on the map, which will correspond, and I'll bring this up closer, to a 2-page spread here in the location book. Now, 1 page here is basically an illustration, although some pages do have not just flavor text, but sort of hint text here. And then this page, which really is the meat of the game, the menu of action choices and how to resolve them. So, the game is played in a series of rounds, and at the start of each round, in order of infamy, players decide what actions to take here on this page. So some of them are mandatory, so at least one person has to choose this. Then this icon means that only one player can choose to put their standees for these actions. The green ones mean that multiple players can choose these. The rules specifically tell you not to look at the right-hand side to see what the details are. You're only basically supposed to choose your action based on what the action says and the icons below it, which are very easy to read. Basically, it'll often say, oh, you will be able to gain that stat, and you will possibly also gain these things. Question marks aren't very helpful, obviously. I wish they had actually made these fold overable so that you couldn't see them, but honestly, you don't have that much time to choose your actions, because I didn't mention this, but there's an in-app timer that basically gives you only a certain number of time for all the players to choose their actions, because if the timer runs out, then you add 1 to discontent. So the more disagreement there is among the crew about who does what, the more discontent rises up on the ship towards possible mutiny. So it also helps out with the alpha player pandemic effect thing in cooperative games. So once everyone's chosen their action, you work your way down, and then you do look and just do whatever it says here. And this will often involve making a skill check. So, as I mentioned before, every pirate has 6 skills, and each of the sheets in the pads that come with the game have a unique, different setup here in terms of your possible total exploration, brawn, hunting, aim, swagger, and navigation stats. So the doomed pirate here can max out at 7 hunting. A different pirate will max out at just 2 hunting. When you check your skill, you will roll your uniquely colored D12, which goes from 1 to 12, and you will add the number of levels that you have gained thus far in the game. Plus, if you have accumulated any treasure, so for instance here, if you pick up the perfect walking stick, then this gives you +1 brawn and +1 navigation, which allows you to add 1 to your die roll. And then depending on the result, you look it up in the location book and it gives you your results. So, if you don't like the result you get, you can spend a reroll token, which you accumulate during the game various different ways. They're very valuable. And if you accumulate misfortune during the game, you get these tokens, which force you to roll 2 dice and take the lower result, and then you chuck this token. So if you accumulate 3 misfortune, you're going to have to take 3 special die rolls. It's the same as being at a disadvantage if you've ever played, something like Imperial Assault or Gloomhaven or so on. So, raising stats is not only good because it lets you get better results more often, but you will notice that on this sheet there are squares with a star on them. Whenever you cross off a square with a star, you get to fill in part of your personal constellation. Every player has one. They're unique. Starting with the middle one, you then would fill out one adjacent to that. You can go in any direction along a line. And if you fill in one with an exclamation point, then you earn one of these tokens. And at the end of the round, you will resolve a constellation event. Now, every player's constellation has 5 possible constellation events. The player who has filled in the most of them is the best pirate at the end of the game, as long as it's 4 or 5. So anyone who doesn't fill in 4 or 5 loses the game. And then among the players who have filled in 4 or 5, the player who's filled in the most, the player or players who fill in the most, they win. Yarrrr. So, when you take an action, often it will tell you to look up a certain paragraph, which you then enter into the app, and it will take you to some kind of consequence. Sometimes there is a choice involved, sometimes there's no choice involved. Often, though, there is an accumulation of threat, which the lookout then builds up here, and then you sometimes have to check threat. So, depending on the scenario that you are playing, or the part of the scenario you're playing, in this case, for example, once you reach 3 threat, then the ship's scribe must check off the next threat event on the ship log and read it. And this is the other beauty of the app, because these numbers are the same on every sheet, but obviously, depending on the scenario you're playing, you will go to a scenario relevant effect. There's also captain's quarters and captain's mission events, which can happen if you take results, which are usually good, sometimes bad. So, other possibilities are taking on supplies or losing supplies, taking on crew or losing crew, fixing the ship or damaging the ship, and so on and so forth. So, players lose if the hull ever goes to 0, if discontent ever meets the crew size, or if the last threat event is triggered. So there is a sort of timer going on at all times, not a real-time timer, but there is a game-specific timer happening. You don't want to spend too long dawdling on an island or in a town, because time will run out. So, however, if you as a group meet the specific goals of the scenario, then all the players with at least 4 out of the 5 constellations win. And if you get 5 out of 5, then you are truly a superior pirate. Yarrrr. So, is Forgotten Waters for you? Well, as I said before, if you don't like integrating technology into your tabletop gaming, then for sure the answer is no. But if you're okay with it, then I think you'll find that Forgotten Waters is a very easy to learn and smooth playing game. There aren't a lot of rules, and those rules which exist are pretty smooth and intuitive and easy to pick up. Which brings me to my opinion that, as far as piratey games go, I think Forgotten Waters is really, really good. Possibly the best piratey game I've ever played. The way the game's mechanics are solidly integrated with the theme really immerses you from the get-go. And if your group is blessed with talented voice actors, then the flavor text really makes it come alive. Even better, the app also provides atmospheric background effects and music, as well as optional voiceovers to read out the flavor text if no one in your group is piratey enough. Yarrrr. So, if you're interested, click on the link below to order your copy of Forgotten Waters. This is David Weiss, your board game concierge here at 401 Games. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Ciao.